Well, good evening and welcome to the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce 2021 Spring Election Candidates Forum. Hi, I'm Craig Warmbold. I am your moderator for this evening. I'm with WBEV 95X and DailyDodge.com, where you can find this program right now under the audio tab, and you'll be able to watch the video back tomorrow under the video tab at DailyDodge.com. We are looking at one race this evening that impacts the Beaver Dam area, along with parts of Dodge, Jefferson, Washington, Dane, Columbia, Waukesha counties. This is the 13th State Senate District race, and we have 4 candidates that are appearing on the ballot joining us this evening. In alphabetical order by last name, we have Republican John Jagler of Watertown, American Solidarity Party candidate Ben Schmitz of Sun Prairie, Democrat Melissa Winker of Oconomowoc, and Trump conservative Spencer Zimmerman of Janesville. Now, we are here live from the Beaver Dam Chamber with these 4 candidates. Everybody's socially distanced this evening. The candidates asked to wear a mask unless medically necessary or if they are speaking. The only people present here today are the candidates themselves, along with 2 of their associates. The members of the media, we've got the Daily Citizen, the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen here with us today, Chamber of Commerce staff, including Tracy Probst, and volunteer staff, and Beaver Dam Mayor Becky Gluen. Now, tonight's program is being divided into 5 segments. Those of you who have been to or listened to some of the Beaver Dam Chamber candidate forums in the past will be familiar with this format. There's basically 3 question and answer segments. We are going to have, of course, then opening and closing statements as well. And we begin today with the introductory statements. Now, the candidates, again, seated in alphabetical order, will have the opening statements begin, I guess you could say, left to right, here at least as far as the panel is concerned that I'm looking at today. And then the closing statements will be the reverse of that. A name has been chosen from a hat to determine who will go first, and then we will proceed alphabetically right, we'll proceed alphabetically to finish up the introductory statements, and then the media question portion will begin. The name that was drawn out of the hat to begin was, and this was drawn by chamber personnel before I even got here. The top candidate is Melissa Winker. She is the Democrat, and we will begin with her with 1 minute. We should note that we do have a individual here who is keeping time, and that individual is Mr. Craig Caston, back behind the bell for another go of it. So when the candidates hear the bell, they are asked to wind down their conversation as quickly as possible, or we will ask you to stop. So again, we will begin with those opening statements from Democrat Melissa Winker.
Hello, my name is Melissa Winker, and I'm the Democratic candidate in this special election Senate race. First, I'd like to say thank you to Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to say thank you to Spencer Zimmerman, Ben Schmitz, and thank you for showing up, John Jagler. I am a 4th-generation Oconomowoc resident. I'm a mom of 5. I'm a small business owner. I'm the wife of a firefighter who was on the front lines during the COVID pandemic, and I'm a woman of faith who will always show up, who's there fighting for you, your family, and your jobs and your health. What you will hear tonight is at least one candidate justifying why they will abandon 90,000 Wisconsinites to not have access to affordable health care by not accepting Medicaid expansion funds. You, the voter, will have an opportunity here tonight to listen to all the candidates on this stage, and it is your choice for this election. It is an opportunity in this race to vote for truth, to vote for someone who will always show up, to vote for transparency, respecting human dignity, and responsive representation.
Thank you. We now go to the Trump conservative candidate, Spencer Zimmerman.
I just want to thank the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce for holding this event, and for all the other candidates for, is my microphone on? Is it working?
Yes.
Okay.
Get a little closer.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to thank the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce and everyone for holding this event, and all the candidates for attending. And I serve in the Air Force. I've always wanted to serve my country. I was actually on duty during the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and after my time in the Air Force, I just felt like public office would be a good way to continue serving. And I've lived all across the 13th Senate District. I lived for a time near Lake Mills, and I actually wrote a chapter in a book about Aztlan. I lived out near Danville here, not far from Columbus. I lived in Sun Prairie, and I've worked for the last about 10 years for a company called Presidential Limousine Service, located in Cambridge, based out of the 13th Senate District. And actually, one of the greatest jobs that I had for that company was I was trusted by the Secret Service to drive for the White House staff when Melania Trump was in town, and that was a great privilege to be able to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now go continuing in alphabetical order with the introductory statements to Republican John Jagler.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks to the mayor. Thanks to the Beaver Dam Chamber for holding this event. I'm State Representative John Jagler. I have lived in Watertown my entire adult life. I grew up in Oak Creek. It was in a radio career before that, and drove from Watertown, where I live with my wife and 3 kids, to first at the Watertown radio station, then to Madison, then to Milwaukee. I left radio from WTMJ in Milwaukee to work for Assembly Speaker Jeff Fitzgerald in 2012. When the seat opened up for the 37th Assembly District, I ran for that position and have been reelected. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve the folks of the 37th Assembly District for the last 8 years, and I look forward to serving them and others in the 37th, 38th, and 39th in the state Senate.
And we now go to American Solidarity Party candidate Ben Schmitz.
My name is Ben Schmitz, and I'm the Solidarity Party candidate for Wisconsin State Senate District 13. I chose to run with the Solidarity Party because, like many Americans, I feel that neither Republicans nor Democrats represent me. We need better than the division they've caused. We need better than the power-grabbing partisan politics. We need better than the degradations of our democracy that Republicans and Democrats have excused and justified as necessary to prevent the other party from doing some great evil or another. We don't have to be manipulated by fear anymore. If you and I start to hope, vote with our consciences for candidates we believe in, and reject the lesser of two evils mentality, then other people will start to hope for change too. Hope begets hope. We may generate enough momentum to help revive our democracy before it's too late.
And that concludes our introductory statement segment of this evening's debate. We now go to the first of 3 Q&A segments. For this portion of the debate, we open questions up from the media. Our media representative here today is Chris Higgins of the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen. Questions can be asked in this segment of one candidate or all 4 candidates. Each candidate with a question directed will be allowed 1 minute to respond. If all 4 candidates are asked a question, each one gets 1 minute. If a question is asked of one candidate only, then the other 3 candidates will get 30 seconds to respond. And we now begin this question and answer portion. We go to Chris Higgins with the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for everybody for being here today. We'll get right into it. Pretty simple question. What remains for the legislature to do to help the state recover from the COVID pandemic? And this is a question for all candidates.
And so in that case, we begin this question with John Jagler, Republican from Watertown.
Well, that's the biggest issue right now facing the state of Wisconsin is the recovery. There's going to be a lot of federal dollars coming in. The legislature tried to get some authorization on where those dollars go, where they get allocated for. You know, we've had businesses that are barely hanging on. Some have been gone forever. People struggling. Right now, the unemployment issue is huge as employers, quite honestly, cannot find people to work. And it's quite frustrating. So the vaccine rollout has picked up steam. I'd like to say that the Department of Health Services has, after a rough rollout, we're getting to the point where there's light at the end of the tunnel on that, but we still have a lot of businesses that are hurting, a lot of people that are hurting, and we need to do all we can to get them back on their feet and recover from not only what the pandemic did, but what the shutdown did from the state of Wisconsin.
We now move on to Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. What Jagler said is right. We need to get businesses back up. we need to allow them to open if they're able to, and to get running as strong as possible. And they need support. They need support from a government that told them that they couldn't operate. And that should be, the legislature should be involved in that discussion. I also want to address, there are other health issues that are arising, and I think that we need to continue to address other things other than COVID. I think one thing that could help even with COVID recovery is one thing I want to advocate. I want to see all expecting mothers covered by Medicaid for the cost of the pregnancy and their birth. I think that's something that if you're pro-life, I think you would want it to be easier or at least cheaper to have a baby than have an abortion. And I think if you're pro-choice, then I think that you don't want women to feel like they don't have an option except abortion. And I think that's something that we can all agree on. We already have things like child tax credit. It's just a short step away.
Thank you. We now go to Democrat Melissa Winker.
We have lost 550,000 American lives, over 6,000 Wisconsin lives, tragically to COVID. These are difficult times for many of us with our health and our jobs. Really, we need to be guided by a compassionate and expert response, a unified plan where we can trust our doctors again. Unfortunately, during multiple crises, our legislators did not meet, including Representative Jagler, for over 8 months when we needed them the most. We are ready, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, to lead with a government that will show up. Positive policy that leads us through us to rebuild Wisconsin, supporting our Wisconsin jobs, fixing the unemployment system without politics, assisting schools that need help to operate safely, and increase broadband access to the small communities that are in our Senate district. We need to trust our medical experts again, not sue and have public taxpayer money go to sue for a mask repeal. So again, we need a bipartisan response to rebuild our great state.
Thank you. We now go to Spencer Zimmerman of the Trump Conservative Party.
The unconstitutional mask mandates and lockdowns need to end. We need to reopen our economy, make sure that our businesses are operating at full capacity. And at the same time, we need to protect ourselves from illegal immigration. Joe Biden has opened up the borders. We have illegals coming in across the border. 1 out of every 4 are testing positive for COVID. This is the last time we should be opening up our borders. We need to make sure we don't have sanctuary cities here in Wisconsin, that we deport illegal aliens. This is a matter of protecting the public against this virus that's going to continue to spread if we have open borders and just let people cross the border. If there's no, we need to finish the wall. And we need to make sure that our borders are secure and that we're not letting this pandemic continue to spread with the open borders policy that the new administration has implemented.
We now go back to Chris Higgins with the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen.
Sure. And again, this is a question for all candidates. Were the results of the 2020 presidential election in Wisconsin valid?
And for this question, we start with Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. I helped on several elections as in the role of a volunteer poll worker, and I was very close to at least the on-the-ground voting process, and I saw firsthand how the checks and double checks that were in place, and I cannot for the life of me imagine how wide-scale fraud could have occurred. I think that we have very secure elections from my personal experience. And whereas, yes, there can be small instances of fraud, someone who maybe is taking care of their elderly parent and their parent receives an absentee ballot in the mail and they just vote on their behalf. That's wrong, shouldn't happen, that's fraud. But, and small things like that could happen, but nothing on the scale of something that could change this election.
Melissa Winker.
The most patriotic action we can do is vote. The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy, and I'll fight all action to suppress the vote. The big lie of election fraud is fueled today in Wisconsin by extreme Republican legislature. So the reality is the Republican appointee and lifelong Republican in charge of cybersecurity said, and I quote, "The November 3rd election was the most secure election in American history. There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes or changed votes or was any way compromised. So I stand by our elected officials on both sides of the political aisle. Our elections are safe, and suppressing the vote by making it harder to cast your ballot is un-American. We should be expanding our opportunities to vote and register, automatic registration, and continuing same-day registration. Your vote is your voice, and it's how we support efficient and wise policy.
We now go to Spencer Zimmerman.
There's plenty of evidence that the 2020 election was rigged. Thousands of affidavits were presented. The Trump administration presented numerous cases. They were all just brushed under the rug, ignored. All the evidence was ignored. No one is doing anything about it because the establishment wants no one to do anything about it because the system is fundamentally rigged from the start. It starts with ballot placement. Studies have shown if your name is first on the ballot, it can mean as much as 20 percentage points advantage just by having that advantage of being first on the ballot. Look who was first on the ballot here in Wisconsin in the 2020 election, Joe Biden. Had Donald Trump been first on the ballot in the 2020 election here in Wisconsin, he definitely would have won because there is an advantage. Joe Biden was given that advantage in a presidential race. It might only be 1 or 2 percentage points, but had Donald Trump been first on the ballot, he would have won the election here in Wisconsin.
We now go to John Jagler.
Wow. Look, there was no question there were voting irregularities that happened in November. And the biggest concern out of all of them is the lack of confidence people now have in the 13th Senate District about voting again in the future. And so we are committed in the legislature to look at what happened. Even in my staff discovered that there was voting irregularities right here in the 13th Senate District in the town of Watertown, where a town of Watertown clerk wasn't checking voter IDs and wasn't even using the voter book. That opens up the door for fraud, and it opens up the door for a lack of confidence that people have in the vote. So we're going to have a series of packages of bills that are going to come out that are going to take a look at tightening up restrictions. There's no question that we should be making it easier to vote and impossible to cheat. That should be the goal for everybody. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. We should be cracking down on those voting irregularities that undoubtedly occurred in November.
We now go back to Chris Higgins with the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen.
So often when I hear about schools or read about schools, it has to do with reopening them. But around here, they are open, and they have been all year. What do schools need right now, and what should they be doing right now to serve their students as the pandemic continues?
For this third question, we begin with Melissa Winker.
As a parent of 5, an educator of 18 years, and as a business owner, I know that every single child in our great state deserves the very best schools, the most highly trained and quality educators and opportunities. But what many taxpayers do not know is that every year, $350 million of your tax dollars are going to private and unaccountable private, non-parochial, and parochial schools, straight from your public education dollars. Over 70% of those students already attended those schools before the voucher system, and that these schools can kick out students at any time for any reason. I strongly believe in school choice, but not funded with your public tax dollars. Wisconsin taxpayers cannot support both private and public schools. And we are not funding our schools at historic levels. I'm sorry, Representative John Jagler, that is not true. We are still at 2011 funding for our schools. We cannot attract and retain our educators, and our rankings are falling. So the reality is, in our pandemic time, we need to support our schools equally across our state.
We now go to Spencer Zimmerman.
Our schools need to be open at full capacity, but what's more important is what is being taught. We need to teach conservative principles. We need to teach American history. We need to teach, we can't have our schools being used for socialist indoctrination. A lot of what's being taught today, cancel culture, canceling Christopher Columbus, a lot of the far left academic platforms that are being pushed in our schools, that needs to end. We need to have free exchange of ideas. Both conservative and liberal ideas need to be both represented. Right now, there is no representation of conservative ideas in our educational system. There's no teaching of our accurate teaching of our history. If you don't understand where this country came from, what the circumstances were under with its founding, if you don't respect America, you're going to raise a generation of revolutionaries and who don't believe in America.
We now go to John Jagler.
Thank you, Craig. When it comes to public education, the last budget that was approved 2 years ago, in fact, every budget I voted for had an increase in public K-12 through education. So that is no doubt a priority for everybody in the Capitol. It was a budget that was agreed upon by Governor Tony Evers. In fact, a lot of the funding that was set up for that last budget was what the then DPI Secretary, Tony Evers, had asked for. But when it comes to the schools being open, you're right, Chris, when you said the schools around here are open. That's not the case across the 13th Senate District. You just ask the parents in DeForest, who are very frustrated right now, that they are not back full-time, that they want their kids back, and they're not. And we've got to get them back. And as far as the control that the legislature has over the dollars for public education, it should go to the schools that were open, that have been open, that had higher expenses because of the COVID pandemic and keeping their schools and their classrooms clean and all the steps that they had to take. That's where the priority should go for the extra money that comes in from the feds, which is going to be extensive in the next 2 months.
We now go to Ben Schmitz.
I want to see parents back in the driver's seat in their children's education. Parents send their kids to private schools or other schools, sometimes public schools, because they see that school as the best option for their child. Every child deserves that. Every parent should be in the driver's seat. Every child deserves the best education for that child. Melissa Winker believes that we shouldn't be funding a child's education if that child doesn't fit into the public school system. Right now, we try to shove all kinds of kids into our public school system, and there are parents who don't trust some of the school in the district that they live in. They should have the option, and it is in the public's interest to support that child's education no matter what. And we need to come up with a better system. I want to propose universal education vouchers. I think that we should extend child vouchers to every child so that whatever money was used to educate, should go to educating that child, can be used by whatever school educates that child.
So we now have an opportunity with time left on the clock to ask a fourth question, beginning with Spencer Zimmerman and going to the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen and Chris Higgins.
Sure. And this question is for John Jagler. The State Journal has reported on a flyer that the state party sent out that potentially suggested that the Journal had endorsed you. I just wanted to make sure that I gave you a chance to respond to that, because I believe that there was nothing in that in the original piece that the State Journal wrote.
Yeah, this was a piece that was put out, produced, and mailed by the Republican Party of Wisconsin. So there's been, it's not a day goes by where I don't say, gosh, how goodness, how many mailers are you going to guys send me? And when you look at them, they're not all coming from the campaign. We have a lot of groups that are supporting my effort for the 13th Senate District. One of them was the Republican Party of Wisconsin, which put out this flyer. Any questions about this flyer should be referred to them. It didn't come from me or from my campaign. It's one of those things that you cannot control sometimes what other people are doing on your behalf. And I appreciate the efforts. I appreciate all the support that I've gotten. But any questions when it comes to that complaint that was filed or the flyer, it was a mail piece, should go to the Republican Party of Wisconsin.
Now, the rules do allow for each of the three candidates to have 30 seconds. And a quick note here, when we begin the questions from the public, we will begin with Spencer Zimmerman. For this, we will begin with Spencer Zimmerman for 30 seconds to either respond to that question or make any comment you would like.
Well, I'd like to talk some more about ballot placement, because this is such a fundamental part of our elections. The entire process just involves pulling a name out of a hat, and whatever candidate's name is selected is given an advantage that can equal as much as 20%. And in a presidential election, that might not be 20%, that might only be 1 or 2 percentage points. But that advantage that was given to Joe Biden by putting his name first on the ballot determine the 2020 election here in Wisconsin. And I think we need to level the playing field, give each candidate equal opportunity to be first.
We now go to Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. John, you mentioned all of the questions should go to the Republican Party, but I think that you could say something, you could respond, you could say I don't support them using words, the Wisconsin State Journal's logo like that. I think it'd be better if they didn't. That's something that you could respond to, even if you didn't produce the flyer.
We now go to Melissa Winker.
So 2 statements I want to make. Governor Evers asked for 2/3 funding for our school system, and the GOP-led legislature did not follow that obligation. So that is not true, unfortunately, from what Representative Jagler said. Our governor does believe strongly in supporting our schools. And number 2, I also would like to echo the statements from Ben Schmitz. Even though all of the flyers that say co-sponsored by the Democratic Party, I review and make sure that they are what I want to say from my campaign. I would assume you saw the same thing, and you could make a public statement right now saying that is not something that you believe in.
Thank you.
You believe in truth.
And we will now go to the next Q&A session. This section is a moderated debate amongst the candidates themselves. So basically, each candidate that has a question directed to him or her will have 1 minute to respond to that question. The candidate asking the question will then have 30 seconds to comment and rebut. And this process will continue until all of the candidates have had a chance to ask a question and offer a rebuttal. Candidates will then reverse positions, beginning with the last set from the candidates from the first round, and the process will start over if time allows. So a number was drawn for this one as well? Because that number or name was drawn at the beginning of the program, we'll begin this segment as well with Melissa Winker.
Representative Jagler, again, thank you for showing up today. You did not show up on other nonpartisan forums that we have had so that folks can really clearly understand where everyone stands. My question is, accepting Medicaid expansion funds of $1.6 billion, that's with the B, our federal tax dollars that we paid in as taxpayers, returning to our own state. It helps 90,000 folks who can't afford health care. It reduces private insurance by 7 to 11%. We accept federal tax money already to fund 40% of that cost and for several other programs that are state. How do you defend your position of not accepting our own federal tax dollars of $1.6 billion to return to our state?
The answer is twofold. I don't believe in expanding the welfare state. I also don't think that this money is guaranteed. While the federal dollars are now, they're on a federal spending spree under this president that we're going to dry up the treasury before those dollars come home. So we'll be on the hook for the money that's dangling like a carrot right now. The other issue is we don't have a coverage gap right now. We're one of the best states in the country when it comes to health care coverage available to all our citizens, regardless of income. So we don't have a coverage gap. We're not trying to solve a problem right now. The other effect is that it'll have on the people with the private insurance. Doctors and healthcare providers don't get adequate funding and don't get adequate reimbursement when it comes to Medicaid funding. So more people on Medicaid means more dollars are going to be taken from them, which means your private insurance that you get from your employer, the costs are going to go up. The costs of services are going to go up. We have, again, the smallest coverage gap of one of the, certainly of the Midwest, and one of the best in the country. We don't need to expand the welfare state.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry,
30 seconds for Melissa Winker.
I'm sorry, that's not true, Representative Jagler. And first of all, by comparing here, expanding the welfare state as compassionate government and as a woman of faith, I believe that we should be helping those who are most in need. Secondly, we accept federal dollars that are limited for many different programs, transportation, education. So that excuse is very flawed. Number 3, we have an affordability gap. Sure, they might have access to health care, but they cannot afford it. There's many reasons why we should accept our own federal tax dollars that we have all already paid into the system to return to our great state.
We now continue in our left to right order, and we begin the next question with Spencer Zimmerman.
Ben, if you Google Solidarity, United States, it comes up as an organization that was founded in 1986 as a socialist revolutionary organization. What is the affiliation between Solidarity Party and that Solidarity organization? Is that somehow is that the political wing of the Solidarity? Because
No.
it's an organization that has over 200,000 followers on Facebook, and they describe themselves as a socialist, feminist, anti-racist. Sounds like kind of a BLM Antifa kind of combination organization. That
Yeah, you have that organization confused with a different one. The American Solidarity Party was founded, I believe, in 2012, and it was modeled after the Solidarity Party in Poland that overturned communism. This is a completely different.
Yeah, because
organization.
like I said, if you Google Solidarity United States, that's what comes up. That organization comes up. So a lot of that's going to be the most well-known Solidarity tie organization.
I don't know what you Googled, but if you Google Solidarity Party or solidarity-party.org is the website, you'll find.
Well, I just
the
Googled
right
Solidarity United States, and what comes up is a socialist.
You have to ask the question.
Okay,
So
sorry.
I think we're back. I think we've met time. Okay. So now we will go to John Jagler, and you have an opportunity to ask a question of anyone on the panel.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Melissa, the governor proposed his budget, Tony Evers again proposing spending increase of $1.3 billion and a tax increase, a budget that's also bloated with fee increases, a budget, quite frankly, that the winner of this is going to be thrown right in the middle of. Do you agree with the governor's budget proposal? It's a pretty simple question, and raising taxes.
Sure, thank you for that question, Representative Jagler. Our budget is our values. So we know that when we create our budget at home, we know that for our state. So what is put in our budget is supporting our schools, supporting our roads, supporting our health care. And it is a balanced budget required by the Constitution of Wisconsin. So the reality is it's also based on Medicaid expansion funds, which makes sense. Also, the tax increases go to the top and most wealthy in our state that should pay their fair share. So these are value statements. It's who we are as Wisconsinites. Supporting those who are most in need. Supporting programs that will uplift and make life better. Supporting broadband expansion for the great communities in our Senate district. These are critical elements to rebuild our great state, our businesses, supporting our families, and really getting back to who we are in our great state.
And now Ben Schmitz has an opportunity to ask a question of anyone on the panel.
Thanks. I'd like to.
I apologize. I jumped the gun. John Jagler has 30 seconds to respond.
Well, Melissa's very well prepared, as you can see. She's got lots of notes, and as someone who's run for office before, I can tell that she's ready for these points. But the fact of the matter is, the budget, again, that was put out by Governor Evers was a political document. It wasn't our values. It may have been values as he sees them, but it wasn't a realistic spending document. It was something that we're going to have to break down and start all over from scratch again, like we did last session, which was an interesting process because we started out, we broke it down, and the governor signed it. Not one Democrat voted for it, but they all ran on it, and 2 years later for re-election.
No, now we go to Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Representative Jagler, do you support the ranked choice voting bill introduced by your colleagues in the Senate? If not, how would you improve the extreme partisanship that results from our simple two-party system? How would you help to give a voice to those who don't identify with the Republican or Democratic parties?
Representative Kuyanga, or actually Senator Kuyanga, sorry, my former colleague in the Assembly, is the person who introduced that bill. It hasn't had a hearing yet. It seems like an interesting process. It certainly would be a game changer. I am open to hearing and learning more about it. It's a fairly new prospect. I think it is way too soon to jump on board and support it. I think it's quite a radical change. But when it comes to the partisanship that's very apparent here tonight, every one but one of the bills that I authored in the Assembly has been signed and brought into law with a unanimous or a voice vote. Reaching across the aisle does not necessarily have to mean blowing up the entire system. But it is an interesting concept, no doubt.
30 seconds.
I'd just like to rebuttal that. I don't think it's a radical concept. I think that all across the United States, ranked choice bills are being introduced, and it hasn't changed greatly the results, but except that now independent voices have a chance to say what they really mean to say, and they don't get roped into the you have to vote for the lesser of two
Sure.
evils or your vote isn't wasted.
Like I said, it's an intriguing thing. I know it's picking up steam. It'll be interesting to watch it move along.
All right, and now we were able to get through one round of that, so we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we reverse the order, which means Ben Schmitz has an opportunity to ask another question.
Great, thanks. I didn't expect this opportunity, but I welcome it. Melissa, do you support the governor's repeated emergency orders? On the topic of partisanship, one of the things that I've most been disappointed in our politics today and our divisive politics is that Democrats and Republicans tend to power grab. They try to help their own party, and as soon as their party is in power, then they kind of forget that they were against all these things like overreaching executive orders, emergency orders, gerrymandering. It happens from Democrats and other states. What are you going to do to prevent power grabbing?
Thank you, Ben Schmitz. I really appreciate this question. I do believe also that our state and country has become way too partisan. When we can't sit down at the same table and really work out complex problems, when we obstruct and we don't legislate and we sue with taxpayer dollars instead of really working on challenges. Unfortunately, right now, the GOP legislation is anti-science. I don't know when this happened. It's also not being compassionate to those who are most in need for health care and for our economy. They didn't meet for 8 months. They didn't pass legislation when we needed them most. They did not meet. And so that's incredibly challenging when we have a mask mandate, one of the simplest things we can do, the cheapest and simplest things. No one really likes these things, but we do it because we care and love our neighbors. So if really they were science and they believed in trusting our doctors again, instead of the crux of a personal liberty, instead of saying, I really respect the fact that my neighbor might be going through some cancer treatment, I can wear this, it's okay. I can do this as we rebuild our great state. Instead, they went around and didn't legislate, but sued and went to the Supreme Court. And that's unfortunate.
Thank you. And now
I believe I get a rebuttal. Is that right?
we go to Ben Schmitz for a 30-second rebuttal.
Thanks. Melissa, you didn't answer my question. I want to know, and you can have some of my time if it's still left, I want to know if you support the governor's repeated emergency orders, especially in cases where the legislature closes the emergency order, and as was ruled today, the Supreme Court said it's illegal for the governor to immediately issue another emergency order, but he has been doing that, clearly a loophole that he thought was a loophole that the Supreme Court said he can't do that.
This is a challenge, so I'm sorry.
I am sorry,
Oh,
we can't go
sorry.
back to you.
We'll have
That's
to
okay.
discuss. Sorry about that.
We now continue our reverse order from the first round and go to John Jagler to ask the next question.
I'll ask the same question back to Melissa. The governor overstepped his bounds. It was no question about it. When you say that we weren't out in session, the governor from the very beginning of this pandemic took control and held onto it. He didn't bring the legislature to the table to discuss any of it, whether it was deciding winners and losers on the initial closing, the essential worker, who was an essential worker. We weren't part of that process. We weren't part of the process on when it came to the vaccine rollout, et cetera, or what the the makeup of the lockdown would occur. But when it comes to the mask mandate, which was thrown out today, it never was about the mask mandate. It was about the governor exceeding his powers. Do you believe Tony Evers exceeded his powers as the statute is clearly written and the Supreme Court decided today?
Thank you, Representative Jagler. The reality is we've never been through a pandemic like this before. Never have we decided that, the pandemic's over after 60 days. It's a challenge, so we have that challenge, and then we have a legislature that's not meeting and is obstructing. And he has called them back to session repeatedly for different avenues of discussion on different bills, and they've repeatedly gavelled in and gavelled out. So how can we trust them to sit down, and if really it's the science and it's the health of our Wisconsinites that the Republicans value, then put the mask mandate back in place. You have the ability to do that now. So you're right, maybe there was a challenge because in history, we haven't had a situation like this in our lifetimes. So we really need to relook when we have a health emergency that lasts beyond 60 days, and we value the health of our neighbors and our most vulnerable. We need to rethink it. We need to sit down at the table, not with obstruction in mind, but with really the health and safety of everyone around us. And that's the true challenge and really the value system that we really have to elevate here tonight.
It's
30
a
seconds.
simple response. We all took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and it was clear that he didn't. He did not follow what was in the statute. He got it slapped back today, and we look forward to being at the table moving forward, and we hope that this is an open door for him now.
As we continue this segment of the candidates asking questions of themselves, round 3 of this particular go-around, we go to Spencer Zimmerman.
Term limits have always been a top priority of mine. I think that just like the president serves 2 terms or 8 years, I don't think anyone in government office should serve no longer than 2 terms or 8 years. And Mr. Jagler, all the other candidates here have signed the U.S. term limits pledge. Both Republican primary opponents of yours have signed that pledge to enact term limits on Congress. What's your position on term limits?
We're having one right now. We have elections. Elections are our term limits. And as far as the U.S. term limits, the state government, whoever is the senator in the 13th Senate District doesn't have a say in that matter. So we have term limits. We have the voters decide on them. The voters could decide in 2 years or whatever to bounce this person from the Senate when the seat comes back up again. So we have term limits. It's the way that the voters have decided. We don't need to artificially put term limits in place.
To say that we have term limits is ridiculous. You look at Wisconsin has Fred Risser, the longest serving state senator. He was first elected back in 1956. That's like a king, elected for life. If you get the right district, the right gerrymandered district, you can just get reelected over and over and over again. And you become entrenched with the public interest or the special interests, and it's impossible to defeat someone who's had that incumbency for decades.
We now go to Melissa Winker to ask a question of any of the candidates.
Representative Jagler, Wisconsin is the most gerrymandered state in the entire country. Is it acceptable to have maps drawn by a nonpartisan group, which is approved by the legislature, which is okay under the Wisconsin Constitution? Wisconsinites support fair maps, not rigged maps, 70% of the time. Why will you not support fair maps, not rigged maps, in Wisconsin?
Again, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution of Wisconsin says the legislature, not may, it says it shall draw the maps every 10 years. That is the process that we go through. This whole fallacy that we're going to have a nonpartisan group draw it. There's no such thing as a nonpartisan person. Everybody has leanings. And those leanings are also the people that are on these panels that it's recommended, whether you're talking about Iowa or the Governor's Commission, are appointed by politicians. They're appointed by people with partisan leanings. So when it comes to redistricting, the process is in place. It's going to be an open process. It'll be a much different process, quite honestly. This issue keeps on coming back up again. You keep on forgetting if the maps are drawn by the legislature and they're not to Governor Evers' liking, he's going to have to either veto them or he's going to sign them one way or the other. The process is going to be different. The legislature has a say in it. We are the ones that are accountable for it. So why put it in the hands of someone that is unelectable, unaccountable when it comes to the maps? If you don't like it, here's an opportunity. I was reelected for 4 years with this same stance.
30 seconds.
Representative Jagler, you did not personally draw the maps in 2011. You hired with your colleagues mapping experts behind locked doors in a law office. And the same thing right now, you can have a nonpartisan group, just like the Iowa model does, and you can approve the maps that are drawn. That is supported by the Wisconsin Constitution. 70% of Wisconsinites believe in a fair democracy, and you know that we have the worst gerrymandered state in the entire country, and everyone expects a fair democracy in our great state.
All right. That brings to a conclusion the second Q&A session as part of this Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce Spring Election Candidates Forum featuring the 4 candidates on the ballot for Wisconsin State Senate District 13. Here in this third segment, traditionally we had always gone to the public and had microphones set up around the Beaver Dam Veterans Center. We are happy to be here at the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce today, but of course under some different circumstances there are no members of the public that are in attendance this evening. So in lieu of that, the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce had put out opportunity to submit questions, and the public has responded. Those questions have been put on individual pieces of paper into a fishbowl, and I'm just going to randomly draw a couple of these questions out. We will have time up until about 10 minutes, about 5 minutes before the hour, to ask these questions. So the last person who was directed a question directly for 60 seconds was Melissa Winker. So for this question, we will begin with Spencer Zimmerman. These questions will be asked of all candidates, and they will all be given 1 minute to respond. Wisconsin should receive about $3.2 billion in federal funding, which stems from the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Do you think the Legislative Budget Committee should have power to object to the governor's use of COVID-19 federal funds? Would this slow down the process of distributing the funds and even allow Republicans to indefinitely delay distribution of funds if they chose?
Well, right now, if you look at our national debt, we're $7 trillion in debt. This country's been spending at an unbelievable rate, another $1.9 trillion. The irresponsibility of the federal government and the conduct of affairs of finances is just terrible. I mean, we're bankrupting this country. We're spending at a rate that we can't sustain. We're passing the tab on to the next generation, and we're going to wake up one day, and this country's going to be completely bankrupt. We are spending way too much money to begin with. And whatever way you want to handle it with the state, we need to stop the spending. We need to cut down this national debt that's just out of control. We're spending at a rate that we can't sustain. This country is going to dig itself into a huge hole, and we're going to be bankrupt.
We now go to John Jagler.
When it comes to this issue, my record is already there. I voted last week on a bill that gave the legislature's Joint Finance Committee oversight on this spending. The governor vetoed it. The reason why I voted for it was based on precedent and based on, again, the powers of a separation here. The Democrats were in control the last time we got such a large federal stimulus package coming in from the federal money. The Joint Finance Committee, again, controlled by Democrats, were given a say in that matter. They chose to separate it from their Democratic governor because, again, this is about the way the legislature traditionally works. The legislature has the power of the purse. That's the way we have on anything when it comes to spending in Wisconsin, when it comes to the budget or any matters, and it should be the same when it comes to federal dollars, that we should have some oversight in there. Tony Evers decided again with a veto that he is not. He's going to be controlling all this. We hope to guide it with some suggestions, whether it's rural broadband, which is one of the things we've talked about, whether it's property tax decreases. We have a say. We can suggest it, but it looks like he's going to be having the control.
Thank you. And we now go to Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. Again, we find another issue, another instance of partisan power grabbing. The governor introduced a budget that includes all kinds of items that don't belong in a budget, items that are just agenda items that should be passed as laws first by the legislature. Things like gun control laws, universal background checks, right to work laws. It legalizes marijuana. These are the things he was suggesting in his budget. And introduced in a budget, and it doesn't belong in a budget. Those should be laws that the state considers, and maybe some of those things should be discussed, and maybe some of them you agree with, but politicians sneaking them in where they don't go, that's just partisan power grabbing once again.
We now go to Melissa Winker.
So wait a second, Republicans didn't vote for the stimulus package. Our own Wisconsin GOP-led majority didn't meet for 8 months. Many of them doubt the authenticity and validity of COVID in our state, and now they want control of the federal stimulus money. It would be different if we didn't have irresponsible decisions and obstruction from our top leaders. Bipartisanship should always be the standard, but gerrymandered has proven that we cannot make that work in our state. Safety and health of Wisconsinites are our priority, and these funds will truly rebuild our state even better.
We have time for another question from the public. This one reads, Donald Trump described Foxconn as the eighth wonder of the world. Currently, its buildings in Wisconsin stand empty. How would you avoid using taxpayer dollars to subsidize another boondoggle like Foxconn? We begin with John Jagler.
Yeah, Foxconn's been a tremendous disappointment. There's no question about it. The good news is, if there is any good news, is they still have time to fulfill some of their promises, and that their tax breaks, when it comes to this, are tied to job creation. They have not met that, and they have not been given the tax breaks that they so sought out for. There's still time for them to have a partner here in Wisconsin, and there's even been some talk from restructuring the deal from the Evers administration, which I think is probably a good idea when it comes to how it has not turned out how we expected it, how it was envisioned, and how it was told it would play out. It's disappointing, but again, there's still time. We should still be a player here and still have open ears to them, and instead of continuing to insult them as the economy took a tank right as they were looking at possibly doing some very good things in southeastern Wisconsin.
We now go to Ben Schmitz.
Thank you. Foxconn's a good example of a government that is catering to big business over small business. What if we could do for small businesses what we did for Foxconn? How would that have changed our economy? I think that, probably the answer comes down to, once again, we need partisan politics. We needed a Republican president, needed a standard to say, look at this great victory that we had. I just want to continue on a little bit on that point because in the last discussion, the Melissa Winker was mentioning, because of gerrymandering, then the governor introducing overspending and also agenda items into a budget. That's acceptable because of the other side is also grabbing power, and so here we go back and forth. Republicans and Democrats justify their abuse of power by saying, well, if we don't do it, then the others will, and I think that really it comes down to the same battle that we'll come back to.
Melissa Winker.
Wisconsin needs wise investments. So, for example, Foxconn, the largest failed handout program to a foreign company in the entire country, in the billions. And it's not just tax incentives. There were homes leveled, infrastructure put in to the cost of already billions in our state, with no jobs, significant jobs to our great state. We're at the bottom, 50th in startups, 3 years in a row. We lead the nation in farm bankruptcies. Heartbreaking, farmers are twice as likely to commit suicide. And this is under Republican legislature. We have difficulty attracting and retaining workers, and poverty has risen in our state. The last 10 years, Republicans have had control. I wish it wasn't partisan. I really do. But this is the fallout. We need to move forward with positive policy that really impacts our families, investing in broadband, our Wisconsin businesses, supporting farmer legislation that gives access to education and opportunities to expand the product market, supporting our schools and community and training opportunities, and our natural spaces, which are so pivotal to what makes this state wonderful.
And Spencer Zimmerman.
The story's not over with Foxconn yet. They might produce electric cars. They've talked about that. And to blame Donald Trump, Donald Trump, there used to be 2 automobile manufacturers here in Wisconsin. We used to have a Chrysler plant in Kenosha. We used to have a GM plant in Janesville. And had Donald Trump been president earlier, perhaps he was going to impose tariffs on other countries that are manufacturing overseas. He could have kept those plants alive. His policies were the only ones that would have kept those plants alive. And it was too late, unfortunately, for the Janesville GM plant. But now, because of Donald Trump, we might have an electric car manufacturer coming here to Kenosha because of the Foxconn deal. Foxconn has talked about manufacturing electric cars. This is a great opportunity, and we can thank Donald Trump for it if we do end up manufacturing cars here in Wisconsin again, because right now we don't have any car manufacturers.
And that brings to a conclusion the 3 Q&A sessions that we have here during the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce 2021 Spring Election Candidates Forum, featuring the candidates from State Senate District 13. This is the closing statements portion of the debate, and we do the opposite for the closing that we do for the opening portion of the debate. We began in alphabetical order from left to right with the opening statement. We conclude going right to left here with the closing statements. And so we give 1 minute to each of these candidates to summarize their case today. And we begin with Spencer Zimmerman.
Well, I just want to thank the Chamber for holding this event, and I want the voters to know that I'm a strong supporter of Donald Trump. I ran as a Trump conservative back in 2016, and early on in the primary, I supported Donald Trump when he was running against Ted Cruz here in Wisconsin. I've been a strong supporter of Donald Trump, and like I said earlier, back in October, I was actually, I drove limousine for the White House staff when they were here in Wisconsin with First Lady Melania Trump. The Secret Service trusted me to drive the White House staff in the vehicle directly behind the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump. You can trust me if you're a Trump supporter and you think that the election was rigged, as I do, that we need to do something about our elections, that Joe Biden is not a legitimate president, you can trust me with your vote, because I am the Trump conservative who will stand up for what you believe in.
We now go to Melissa Winker.
January 6th is a horrific day in our history now where police officers were murdered and significant property damage to our Capitol, and it led many to rethink party politics. We look to elected leaders for courage and truth and wisdom, and they should show up. They should listen and take action. And as your future senator, I will always show up to work for you across party lines to solve complex problems. And these are the things you're telling me you value: affordable health care, a clear, unified COVID plan, great jobs, and thriving working families. We can have both. We don't have to choose. The legalization of marijuana, 83% of you agree with that. Fair maps, 70% of you agree. Transparency, supporting our rural small communities, supporting our family farms. This community matters to me, just like it matters to you. And as a woman of faith, I'm going to fight for a society that elevates us all to do better. I will lead with compassion and honesty. I will prioritize your family, health, and community. I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you. Ben Schmitz.
I decided to step forward and run as a Solidarity Party candidate because I believe that if good people sit on the sidelines and do nothing, the evils of our day will prevail. A line from a Josh Garrels song goes, "How do good men become a part of the regime? They don't believe in resistance. I believe in resistance. I want to cause a disruption. I want to bring critical thinking and creative solutions to today's problems. I want to show the men behind the machine that we're not going to lay down and let them control us. If you vote for me, you may help others to believe that, hey, maybe it's possible to fight back against abuse of power. Maybe our nation can overcome the divisions. Your vote will help me to believe that. If I do well in this election, I will run again. Ultimately, I'm running as a Solidarity Party candidate because I hope for our future. Because the more we believe and stand together, the more others will too. Hope begets hope. We can stand against partisan bias, against power-grabbing politics, with positive solutions for our state and for our people. Thank you.
John Jagler.
Thank you. I've run a very positive primary campaign. Haven't even talked about my opponents, but I will talk about this Trump Conservative Party thing, because there is no such thing. The Republican Party is what Donald Trump said he should support. Spencer Zimmerman ran. I get it. He wants to be in the legislature. He's run for the legislature, I believe, 14 times, including most recently as a Democrat. So when it comes to that, why should you elect me? I have a proven record. I have a proven record in the Assembly of backing the badge, of defending.
Can I respond to that?
Defending
No, you can't, I'm
your
sorry.
defending your Second Amendment rights, of being pro-life, pro-family, and of protecting Wisconsin values. And so I look forward to doing that in the Senate, as I have in the Assembly the last 4 sessions, and I hope to continue that with a strong record.
I've always
showing on
ran
April
as a
6th.
conservative.
Unfortunately,
I've always
the
ran as a
candidate
conservative.
is
And-
the debate is now over with the end of the final
Look,
of the 4 closing statements. So
you can,
we have to unfortunately move on. It's the process that we followed for years, if not decades, here at the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce. The host of this particular debate and the rules that were supplied to all the candidates prior to their coming coming here and as part of the agreement to come here. So unfortunately, we do have to end the segment and the debate at this point. We would like to thank everybody that participated. We'd like to thank all of the candidates here. That includes John Jagler, the Republican from Watertown, Ben Schmitz from Sun Prairie with the American Solidarity Party, Melissa Winker, Democrat from Oconomowoc, Spencer Zimmerman, Trump conservative from Janesville. We also would like to thank the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce, Tracy Probst, the executive director, and Craig Caston for providing the time this evening, and members of the Beaver Dam Chamber Board of Directors. We would also like to thank the Beaver Dam Daily Citizen and Chris Higgins for supplying the questions during the media portion of this evening's debate. We'd also like to thank the good folks I'm affiliated with at Good Karma Brands and DailyDodge.com, AM 1430 WBEV, and everybody who took time to listen this evening over the airwaves. And we would like to note that if you would like to watch the video of this evening's debate, you can find that under the video tab at dailydodge.com. We will have that posted in the next 24 hours, with apologies if you were not able to view that tonight as planned. We do also want to make a special note. While you're going to dailydodge.com, if you'd like to hear more from these candidates, we did have an opportunity last week to sit down with each of them individually in a one-on-one setting. And if you go to Daily Dodge under the audio tab, you will find each one of those individual one-on-one conversations. I also want to thank from Good Karma Brands here, Cale Zomer for running video and audio here at the chamber tonight, and Jeff Hall back at the station for monitoring everything. And again, thank all of you who are planning on going out to vote or who have already voted in this April 6th election for participating in democracy. Thank you, and that is going to conclude our broadcast here from the Beaver Dam Chamber of Commerce, the 2021 Spring Election Candidates Forum, featuring the 4 candidates on the ballot for Wisconsin State Senate District 13. Thank all of you. Thank you all very much.